Welcome to Happily Ever Aftermath, the podcast that explores the movies that influenced how we view love and romantic relationships. Yes, there will be spoilers. I'm your host, Diana Roderick-Sconard. I'm not ready for a relationship right now. I can't handle it. I can't even handle a plant. We're talking about The Night We Never Met, and I'm very happy to welcome back Janet Varney. Hi.
Hello. I'm happy to be back and happy to be talking about this movie that I seriously was like in love with when I was a teenager.
Oh my goodness. So it's just like the perfect intersection of the JV Club and what I tend to talk about on this podcast. So thank you again.
That's right.
Oh, wonderful. So when you said, okay, how about The Night We Never Met? I'm like, okay, write this down very carefully and don't accidentally get A Night to Remember or anything else that sounds vaguely like something else. So
That's right.
I'm glad I got that. So what's really great is I've never seen this movie before.
Mm-hmm.
But when I looked at it, I'm like, oh, wonderful. I get to go in as a blank slate. So it was amazing because I tried really hard not even to read the synopsis or anything like that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So you said, your teenage years, you watched this. Tell me about how it even happened, how you watched it in the first place.
I don't know how I found it. I mean, I know I had the DVD. And it's not like I saw it in the theater or anything. It already existed. So I don't know how I found it, but I definitely saw it early. And then, I mean, maybe it was like on HBO or something. We taped. I don't know.
That's always possible.
Yeah, but I just thought it was so funny and so, it's sort of it feels like a kind of ancestor of like the really crazy like Savage Steve, like Better Off Dead, One Crazy Summer movies, in that there's some kind of magical realism stuff that happens,
right?
But it's not as absurd, so it's sort of more, it's like more grown up than that, but still has these kind of sweet, like very New York elements. I think, like, I would say like this movie, I think it came out in 93, and I feel like it definitely, I'm sure there's something that, there are things you can point to that it was inspired by, but I feel like movies like Serendipity,
yes,
or Sliding Doors, or
absolutely,
or You've Got Mail, like those feel like they certainly came after this, and this feels like very much, kind of an origination point of something like that for some of those movies.
When you said Serendipity, I was the first movie that popped into my head was Till There Was You, also Jeanne Tripplehorn, where it was just just missing people as they were going, and I wanted to see which one came out when.
Which one was Till There Was You? I feel like maybe I haven't seen it, but
so
I know what it is. I know it.
So it's Jeanne Tripplehorn and it's Dylan McDermott. Not Dermot Mulroney. So yes. Dylan McDermott.
That was the era of Which is Which.
And what happens is that they're so destined to fall with one another that their lives keep intersecting in ways that are just, I would say, closer to the magical realism and the absurdness, where she is the ghostwriter for this woman played by Sarah Jessica Parker. Okay, this is becoming more and more freaky with the
funny.
connections.
Isn't that funny? Wow.
And so she is dating Dylan McDermott's character. He is a architect who is actually going to be replacing Jeanne Tripplehorn's building that she's trying to preserve.
Okay,
and they keep intersecting with one another. Apparently they went to college together, but they never quite met.
Got it.
And it's just, it's interesting, but you're absolutely right. And when you talked about movies like Better Off Dead, my first thought was like, oh, that's right. This is like a, not just like it is the realism part of that, because let's say it's just less quirky.
Yeah, it's definitely less quirky, but I love the quirk that it preserves, and it just feels like a very confident. It feels like a really confident rom-com. It's got really, it's very tightly written. I think its jokes are so successful. It's still very, very funny. I mean, I hadn't seen it in a really long time, and it really just popped into my head. Like there was no kind of me like hemming and hawing over a series of movies, I was like, I have nothing. I have nothing. I don't know what to watch. And then I was like, oh, what about this? And so it just popped up in its own magical realism way. But I hadn't seen it. And with a couple of exceptions, but I think that even the exceptions that you could sort of read into being un-PC, I almost feel like they were satirizing themselves at that time anyway. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it really holds up. And I feel like, I feel, and a lot of the styles are back, man. Those fakely press-on nails are back in a big way. It's just the right time to revisit a movie like this.
I thought, first of all, both. I'm glad you brought both up, because the first part of it was just like, oh, I don't care for this. And at the same time, oh, of course, it's the existence of this, while unfortunate, is also like, but it's real. This character, Brian, is gross.
Oh, totally. and like the way that his marriage ends up happening with the mm-hmm. sort of kind of seemingly unhappy Justine Bateman character is, yes. It's a bummer, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like, in fact, that's what Brandon kind of like walked through the room and then found himself getting sucked in, and he'd never seen it.
Right.
And he was like, he was there for a Brian scene. He was like, wow, I'm so glad you said that, because he was like, wow, God, this really reminds me that guys like you see on the internet were always there, but we just didn't see them on social media because we didn't have social media.
Right.
And I was
right.
like, unfortunately, yes, that is extremely true.
Unfortunate, but at the same time, though, again, it's just like, it exists. I'm going to be sad that it exists, but that doesn't mean that, I don't have to see it I want to not see it in movies, and if may I also point out, so Ellen's character, she is a hygienist, and just having to deal with the very gross, but also not gross in real life, Garry Shandling.
Yeah.
So,
which again, like, I wish I could say I felt like that kind of behavior has ended, but like, that's not over. Like,
no.
It's going to take a while before people stop being skeezy, and maybe they never will, because
mm-hmm.
some people are just going to be skeezy. But
right.
Yeah, but I think, again, even with that, it's so gentle. Like, he's such a loser. Do you know what I mean? He's clearly such a loser. She is unflappable. She is in her zone. You know what I mean? Like, so in that sense, again, like, it's her response to it is very like, go fuck yourself. You know what I mean? And it's just very like, this is so normal. Mm-hmm. It doesn't even faze me. You're a fucking loser.
Right.
And so I think that's like part of what makes it still work for me, is that he's just so helpless, and it's Garry, you know what I mean? And if it weren't him and it were someone who had like a little more creepiness and a little less like haplessness, mm-hmm. but he's playing everything for loser laughs, as he tends to do. He's clumsy. He's like, why don't you help me with this thing and I'll touch your hand, isn't that nice? Like, and she's just so like, ugh, whatever.
Right. And if anything, that speaks to her character more. This isn't about him, this is about her, and how she, as you said, is unflappable.
Yeah,
I like that so much. Oh, and another thing that I think is amazing with, you said, the styles coming back as they are, is this still feels very contemporary. I mean, there's no technology, but let's really think about this. People struggling to live in New York, that they're accepting these little, I guess timeshare is what they threw out there. And it's very true. It's like, I get 2 days where I can just be away and I can be myself. And this is my space. And it's just, that feels very much the case right now.
Absolutely. And mm-hmm. just like the sort of snobby consumerism of the people who shop at Dean and DeLuca, like, I feel like all of that still feels very real and true. Mm-hmm. And like, again, and I also like that none of the characters are perfect. I feel like that's also a very contemporary trope that we don't necessarily see in rom-coms from that era. Mm-hmm. Up to and including Annabella Sciorra's her marriage is like, I love that, like, it's not great, mm-hmm. but he's not a bad guy. Like, it's just they just shouldn't be together. They absolutely should not be together. Mm-hmm. But she commits a sin, and I don't blame him at all for being so angry. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I thought that the way that stuff was handled was so grounded and so tragic in such a real way, considering that we also have the Jeanne Tripplehorn pastel character, who's like one of my that's like my favorite role she's ever played. Because it's so fun to see her doing comedy, and you never get to see it. So to be able to balance that, and also like just and it's very sketch like. There's just like a lot of funny kind of sketch moments where you're like, oh, in almost like the sweetest thing at the Cameron Diaz. I remember thinking when I saw the Cameron Diaz and oh my God, why am I blanking on
Christina Applegate?
Christina Applegate. So sorry, Christina Applegate. I'm sure she's listening right now. Like that movie to me always seemed like just a series of funny kind of sketches, like sketch comedy that got stitched together into a movie that sort of succeeds because, it's these vignettes, and that's what a lot of this movie is too. But like the exchange with a bartender that Annabella Sciorra has, and the exchange with a cab driver that she has, like those that feels it's that's where the kind of love letter to New York stuff comes in, where it's like, she sort of has this instant understanding with people. And I think if I'm reading into it too much and maybe romanticizing it too much, I feel like that's this sort of idea of like New Yorkers understanding each other and being like, we have a shorthand, listen, you come into a bar, you're going to get a guy who's like, hey, take care of yourself. You got to take care of you. You know what I mean? And who's like very present. Like I feel like they cast someone who's like a therapist.
Yes.
And then the cab driver, like he's not like he feels real. Like he's certainly Indian, but he feels his accent is not over the top. It's not a poo. It's not like he's not the character in the situation. The character is her, and he's the straight man.
Right.
And he's like, oh, all right, okay, let me get you some Kleenex. Like, I will help you. And then we have the who's on first, which happens a lot in this movie because that's a, sort of Shakespearean mistaken identities thing. So we have him being like, well, what do you mean this guy's this guy and that guy's that guy? What are you talking about? Like, let me just get you home. I got to get, you don't want to go home. Okay. Like, I don't know. All of that stuff, I think, is, again, it's painting with a softer brush than some of the stuff we see in this era. And it feels to me way more self-aware, and therefore I think like travels forward in time better than some stuff does.
You are absolutely right. And when you talked about how, though these people aren't perfect, one of the scenes that really spoke to me was when Sam was in the bar and you had Pastel, who was just with another man but was jealous because that man was flirting with somebody else. And actually, it may have been elsewhere, but the point of the scene was you have Sam, who was mad at Pastel, and then I believe it was Leslie, all these people in this space just as like, he's yelling at her, but she's like, Pastel is saying like, oh, I'm my own woman, and, and he's bickering back at her, and Leslie comes in and just like, Sam, why are you saying these things to her? And Pastel yells at Leslie for...
yeah. Oh, it's so good. Yeah, that's the morning after. Yeah, that's the first, not at the club, but at the apartment.
No. Right.
Yeah. It's such a great scene. Yeah, because he's super bitter. It's super awkward because his ex-girlfriend that he's in love with, which we like, that's the other thing, is that everyone acknowledges that he's like you said, this is this theme of, picking someone and being really stubborn and like setting yourself up over and over again for the same heartbreak. And everybody else is like, we can all see that you're doing this, and we can all see that you just shouldn't be with her. Like, you should not love this girl. And even she is like, you shouldn't love me. Like, you want me to be something that I'm not.
Right.
And then, that great moment where Leslie says something to Sam, and she's like, no, you leave Sam alone. It's so funny. But in the bar scene when she's trying to make the guy, Billy Campbell, by the way, who's the Rocketeer.
Right.
When she's trying to make him jealous, and he's like, you can't just use people for your own devices. And she's like, oh, since when? And like, oh, she's so insecure. It's great. I just love her as that character.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And again, it's like in a traditional type of story, it's like, well, we hate her now. It's like, well, I mean, she has some points, so I'm not going to fault her for that. But if she's causing this heartbreak, well, Sam's kind of doing a good job of causing heartbreak for himself,
Oh,
too.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's the message that sort of works, is that she's like, I know exactly what I am.
At the very least.
You're constantly offended by decisions I make. But I've never pretended to be anything else. Yeah, exactly. But he still is like, no, but you know, his issue is like, I think he's hung up on this idea of her being, you know, this very like self-aware artist and being this, you know, and like having these strong points of view about like what is America and stuff. But like, she's completely self-absorbed. You know, he comes over to her apartment and is like, I see you put some more posters of yourself up. You know, it's just great. Yes. I love all of that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's very well written. It could feel a little bit off with how things are made, but you're right. This is working better, and it's a little bit more challenging, which I think we need more of. I mean, not myself personally. I do enjoy a comfy, very easy romantic comedy, but this was wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so glad you liked it. I mean, like I said, I didn't know how I was gonna feel, but I was like, nope, I'm still totally delighted by it. Like, yeah. I'm still totally delighted by it, you know. And then like he, you know, he has that moment where he's like, you know, I just wish somebody would show up from Norway who's only going to be here a couple of weeks before they go off to da-da-da. And then they just like, you know, manifest Dana Nicholson Wheeler, who's always also wonderful.
Right.
As Inga, who is this sort of like, you know, we don't see any self-absorption the way we do with Pastel, but we're like, oh, honey, you have a type, and that type is not going to advance you as a human being in a relationship.
Right.
Like, you're not having meaningful conversations with these women, and you're stuck, and like, you don't look good in this. But in the same way that like he could, like, I guess in a way I almost feel, and maybe this is not true, and I'm like just pontificating in the moment, and I will realize that I was totally wrong, but I almost feel like you could switch Annabella and Sam's genders and like it would kind of all still work. Do you know what I mean? Like, she keeps picking these guys who are just like hunks, who aren't too bright, who aren't challenging her intellect, which she has a substantial amount of, and you know what I mean? And like, he settled down with somebody who wants a wife, you know, who wants a family, but he's like, is that who I am? And
right.
I don't know. So it's sort of, I think there's something kind of neutral about the bad choices or the emotionally immature choices that they make.
Yeah. Universal relationship struggles and traps.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely. And in all fairness, like, the only trap that she fell into is that they want different things. And I actually really felt for her husband just when he said, you get married, you buy a house, you have kids. And I'm just like, yes and no.
Yeah. And you know, there are people out there in Jersey and everywhere else who still feel that way, who are like, what? I'm the husband. Of course I go buy the house to surprise you. That's what husbands do for wives.
Right.
They surprise you to tell you that we're moving even further away from the city. And I love it's the modern ranch colonial. Like, that's a lot of different styles of houses that don't go together at all.
Yeah. And I'm like, say open concept kitchen. Say open concept kitchen.
Yeah, no, I love that actor, and I think he plays it so well. I think he does such a great job, and yeah, when he, boy, I got to tell you, I hope that you don't usually start this out with like explaining the entire rundown of the movie to people, because everyone will be completely lost.
The entire idea is, because we talk about this kind of thing, the spoilers are implied in my opening, so it's just like, there will be spoilers. So
great. Gotcha. Yeah, in case people are wondering what the plot is, like, hopefully, I mean, I feel like you would have watched the movie if you're going to listen to this conversation. But,
but also timeshare, people in places, different days. The second notes were being left for each other, I'm just like, oh, okay. This is how. This is how.
Yeah. Well, and it's again, like the other movies that we talked about that came after it. It's very much the, you know, I thought it seemed like it would be a fun movie to do for your podcast, because it is one of those, like, how do you fall for somebody without knowing what they look like, and how do you fall for somebody when they're never in the movie together until the very end, that kind of thing.
Right.
Which is also, and I should say also Sleepless in Seattle. Like, all of that stuff came after this.
Right.
Didn't it? Sleepless in Seattle, I think, was after. Maybe it wasn't.
It was very close.
Yeah, because they are very. Because if you took these characters and had them be Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, like, that would work. Also, except for I'm glad that it's adorable little Matthew Broderick and Annabella Sciorra. And by the way, the subtext was like, seeing that it was a Miramax movie, I was like, I feel like Annabella is one of those people, right, who got completely effed over by Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah,
like, she's one of the ones who you're like, what an adorable, like, unique person. There was no one else like her in movies at that time, and boy, we did not see much of her.
Right.
After that. I
would even say we were robbed.
I know. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because Brandon was like, I feel like we never see Annabella Sciorra. And he was saying, yeah, I'm pretty sure she was one of the Miramax victims. And he was like, I mean, the closest I can think is Marissa Tomei, but they are so different. Like Annabella's she's not, she doesn't have that like goofy effervescence that Marissa Tomei has. Like, she's more kind of I don't know. She's different. They're different. I mean, but I agree that was sort of the closest approximation I could come up with too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it would have been great to get to see her do more.
Exactly. Totally. Oh man, I really do love how I don't want to say cameos, because these were people who were just starting out, but just the little reactions I was having. I'm like, oh my, is that Naomi Campbell? Why? What is she?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes little sense. And then you've got Doris Roberts as a neighbor who's there, and it's just randomly popping up, like the person explaining all of the different styles of the house. I'm like, that's the guy from CSI.
And Christine Baranski as Annabella Sciorra's sister, which is like, she's so perfect in everything she's ever done, and she's so great in this. I mean, again, you have this like this New York trope of this like wealthy woman who comes into the city and goes shopping, and the first moment we meet her, it's oh, you look so nice, and she's like, oh, it's matinee day, which we all understand to be presumably the matinee shows on Broadway, and it turns out immediately that it's not about that. It's that everyone else is artsy and goes to the theaters, and then she goes shopping because no one's out shopping, just frivolously spending money. And yet, her loyalty to her sister seems so grounded and is so sweet. And again, like, Christine Baranski is such a role model of mine, because she always does. Even like, I remember when she was in Addams Family Values, she was like a camp counselor.
Yes.
But she plays these cartoonish characters that I often end up playing, and is so over the top it shouldn't work. But like, there is something about it that is so grounded at the same time that like you just buy in. You buy into the idea that she's a real person and not a cartoon.
Yes.
And I feel like that really influenced me growing up. Like, I feel like that was something I paid attention to,
Yeah, and once again, you have this actress who plays a minor role, but yet making such an impact. Again, and when I think about it, like, I watched, it was a Dennis Leary movie called The Ref, and she was just the sister-in-law, and I still have this very biting part where she finally can't take any more of her mother-in-law, and she just goes, slipper socks, medium. Like, wow, that really is lodged in my head, but good on her for being very memorable.
Yeah, the whole exchange she has with Aaron, the husband, Annabella Sciorra's husband, when I think it's Sciorra, not Sciorra or Sciorra. I feel like I've heard people say it a lot of different ways, but I'm gonna assume it's Sciorra. I don't know.
I'm going to accept.
But yeah, when she's in her like crazy glass house, and her and Aaron shows up with his tickets to Neil Diamond, and she has very graciously volunteered with like huge gusto to lie for her sister.
Yes.
Because her sister has decided, like, I'm gonna have to, I'm gonna go after Sam, the guy who's been leaving me these amazing cooked meals and building plant boxes for my basil, and and I'm just going to go for it. And I know this is wrong and I don't feel great about it and I'm super uncomfortable about it, but here I go. And so Christine Baranski has lied for her. And so she's meant to be at her sister's. So he shows up and she has zero plan. No one ever thought that it would ever come to this. So we just get to see her thought process like, oh, I'm sorry, she's not here. Dental emergency. She's like, won't open the door for him, is talking to him through the glass, is pantomiming stuff. So dental emergency is like her brushing her teeth. I just like, it's so precious. I absolutely love it.
Yes. And it's also just, I love the way she's just immediately supportive of her sister for something where people just be like, whoa, what are you doing? No, it's like, good. Yes. How can I help? I will lie for you.
Yeah, she's on board.
So in terms of what's really great about this as well is that you have many different relationships in many different stages operating, with heartbreak and breakup over here, and then marriage, that's just not quite right. And in fact, once again, Christine Baranski's character is just like, has to be reminded that Ellen is happily married. And she's like, well, happily? Or
yeah.
And so that, and then you have the Brian who's gonna, about to be married with, once again, with the arts and culture thing of just like, no, Wednesday is ballet night. Remember, we have all these tickets. So at the cornerstone of this, and of course, what I'm rooting for is for eventually, Sam and Ellen to find their way together. Even though I'm hesitating, like it's a little bit easier to say, Brian, stop being hung up on this person who's clearly not interested in you. And then it occurred to me, well, Ellen, you're unhappy and you're clearly not interested in your own husband. So it's just like, let's all of this come together. And I was really curious how it was coming together, but also not sure how much I wanted to root for it, but I found myself doing it very easily because it's like these very charming characters, even with their flaws, deserve this happiness.
Yeah.
And I can't even figure out so the general premise of like the question, when did they fall in love? I'm not even sure, because even their questioning is like, I've never even met this person before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea of sort of getting to know someone through a shared space and getting a sense of who they are because of what they are interested in and what they like. I mean, it's kind of like a modern day dating app. Like, it's unintentional, but you're meeting somebody through what they're into and getting the sense of like, well, I love this wonderful food that he's cooking, and he's going out with women who aren't interested in what he's interested in. Of course, they are also, sort of tropes.
Of course.
But I love, and I can never remember her name, but she, of course, is most well known for her role as the kidnappee in Silence of the Lambs.
Right.
But she's so good in this, and as a vegetarian who's sort of in, she's got a chiropractor. It's all said in fun, but she's not wrong in that, like, she doesn't eat veal because of the way quote unquote veal is treated. And so like, it's, again, she's not wrong, but like, that's something that's part of Sam's, what he's into, and he's into eating and cooking and, really living in that place, and she's not. And so we have this, we have this guy who's sort of doing all of the things that make him authentically who he is, but he's choosing the wrong audiences. Yes. And yet he has inadvertently the right person and the right audience there. And likewise, Annabella Sciorra, Ellen, she's interested in art and painting, and she's sort of, has this sort of yearning for arts and culture and wants to be more kind of in the mix, and feels very called to that, whereas her husband feels very called to a different kind of life. And so she's painting, and she's reading, and they're sharing books with each other, and so you do get the sense of like, oh, if this were an internet dating app, she would just be spending time on his page looking and finding out that he likes this movie, so she goes to see it, and you know what I mean? But in this case, it's this idea of shared space, which I think really works.
Yeah, it was really great, especially when he was leaving a little note saying, just like recommending a movie. I didn't realize the movie that Ellen took her husband to was the one that Sam had recommended.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's even more ingrained in the story, where it's just like, oh, this sounds like it would be there. And she's, crying in the middle of it. And her husband's just like, all right, the game's on.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I do feel like, again, this is something that maybe we fill in, again, as like a fan of the movie, maybe I'm filling this in, but I don't feel like it's happily ever after, in the sense that like, I don't feel like I feel like they're still going to have to confront their issues. Like, they're not, do you know what I mean? Like, they're not perfect people who suddenly are made perfect by each other. It's like, well, this has been a hot mess. You want to try to untangle this together?
Yeah.
Instead of like, because, at some point, like, they're going to have a conversation about the fact that he's like made really bad decisions in his relationships, and, needs to have found like, and that's like a sort of punishment. Like, it's a self-punishment. And so is like staying in a marriage that isn't what you want, but also isn't, you're not married to someone who's abusive. You're not married to somebody who's a bad guy. And so you sort of stay in, and at a certain point, it's almost like you're like, well, you made this decision, so you're going to suffer through this, even though her husband deserves better than that.
Right.
So I think, like, in my mind, because the movie's so self-aware and because the characters are complicated, in my mind, like, I feel like it's not like, and that was it, and everything was fine. I can sort of imagine the sequel to this where they're still kind of like, when you make a decision to get involved with someone when you're still at a messy point in your life, that doesn't mean that it can't work out, but it definitely means like you're not going to be able to run away from all that stuff. So in my mind, they got to deal with it. They got to deal with it, but they're going to see what happens when they actually try to date somebody that's right for them. Like, what's that going to look like? I don't know, but we'll see.
I suppose the real question is that when they do first meet for the first time, they're like mildly at each other's throats, where it's just like, what are you doing with my grandmother's blanket? And just back and forth. They'll just like, well, you were this guy. I was not that guy. I was this guy. But I also want to give Sam's character a little bit of credit, in that after all of the strangeness of Brian's fiance coming in and rattling up all of the environment, he does apologize. And because I think that was fascinating, that this apology really felt grounded and genuine, as opposed to the usual, like, the mistakes that we made, mistaken identity, but now we know for sure, so, oh, there was a mistake, all is forgiven. Like, no, you were really an a-hole.
Yeah. And he was hungover, and she probably didn't sleep well. And I love that he slept on the couch, because that would be the most logical place to sleep,
right,
if you were going to spend the night. But like, she's never going to sit on that couch again. Like, she had sex with a guy she did not want to have sex with, and that's that's a tough watch. Like, with now, like, she absolutely consents. Like, she does consent,
right?
But it feels very. It feels molesty, frankly, because we know that she is there under false pretenses. She doesn't realize what she's doing, and so that's complicated. And that's I think that would be a longer, more complicated conversation if the movie were made today, for sure. But at the same time, like, in a way, and I'm of a different generation than someone younger. A younger woman might watch this and be like, oh my God, I couldn't even watch that. That was so horrible and so uncomfortable. And, but in my mind, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I also still know teenagers that I've worked with who are like, oh, I totally shouldn't have slept with that person. Like, don't get me wrong. I fully consented, but like, he's an idiot, and that, and I feel like I violated myself, in that. And so those things, again, are like, there's a lot going on there. But I think it's still, that I think is a part that maybe you wouldn't see in the same way now, but I think there's a version of that still works, that is very much about those questions that we ask ourselves when we make decisions like that.
Right. Right. And what you were saying about you're of a generation where that's just, people who have done that. At the very least, I was surprised when I'm just like, oh wow, there's not going to be a last minute, wait, you're not?
Yeah.
And then but the fact that it happened, and even just a little bit of heartbreak afterwards when she asked Brian, like, can you hold me?
I know.
And I'm just like, oh, and then
he's such a tool.
It's such a awkwardness. But for me, if I'm thinking of people who are probably even younger than me, actually just going with like, oh well, I regret the person, but I still, chose to do this, not in the whole like personal responsibility thing, but it's like, but I wanted to. But now looking back, that's that I don't like who it was with type of thing. So there's different ways of owning
that
it.
is fully happening with young people on Tinder. Like I've had conversations, so that is still very much alive.
Right.
Even with the, advances that we've made in some areas.
Right.
In stuff like that,
Mm-hmm. But again, it's also not pretending that it doesn't happen either. So feels icky, but at the same time not pretending it's all shiny happy. So that's something at least. And
exactly.
it's very thought-provoking in that I'm still thinking about it, Janet.
For like a quirky little movie, it sort of brings up a lot of stuff, and the the relationship with Justine Bateman, with her character, shout out to Justine, as this very like she seems very boxed in the sense that she doesn't seem like she's not a particularly fleshed out character. She's also she's about as fleshed out as Annabella Sciorra's husband, I guess, is. But
right,
we get the sense of her that it's very like Whit Stillman movie. It's very like Barcelona or like Metropolitan. This girl who went to Cornell. She's got her Cornell sweatshirt on, as you do.
Right.
She's she's obviously come from wealth. She's found this guy who's like, she loves going to the arts and stuff, and it's like this accepted thing, like, well, you know how this works. Like, I went to Cornell, he went to Dartmouth. Of course he's a broker, and of course boys will be boys, like brokers will be brokers. Like that's what I signed up for. I signed up for the dude. But also I can kind of control him. I'm absolutely the one with the power in the relationship. And she still wants that. And that's actually one of the things I said, like, is fairly un-PC, is that she comes to believe that he was sleeping with this girl. He hooked up with her once, but Justine Bateman's character, whose name is Janet, by the way, does not necessarily know that, but has decided that she wants to, Matthew Broderick's like, look, I mean, essentially he's like, I think this guy's a total schmuck, but like,
right,
if this is what you want, just go ahead and like pretend like it never happened.
Yeah.
Because he clearly still wants to marry you. And like, in my mind, he's just basically like, look, you love this guy. I think he's a piece of shit, but clearly this is what you want. So here's what I would say. If for some reason you want to stay with him, play it like this. And she does play it like that.
Right.
And her life doesn't get disrupted. She still gets married and stuff. But I feel like she's a very joyless character. And I think that was very intentional. I felt like that was very self-aware, is that she's just very joyless. And so when he gives her that advice, it's not like, oh my God, this is so awful. Like, he's terrible. Like, what an un-PC thing to advise her to do. It's like, no, they represent that couple where, she's like it's like she's been conditioned to think this is how it's supposed to be.
Right.
And I don't think that it tries to sell itself as anything other than that, which I also totally appreciate.
Right. What's strange about that, though, is I filled in the blanks of their relationship because we don't know much. You had said it exactly. It's the relationship and the character is not fully fleshed out. But when she had that conversation with Matthew Broderick, he said what he did, and I'm just like, oh, why would you say that? And I filled in the blanks of their relationship is that even though it was the convenience of went to the right schools or in the right circles, has the right job, I wanted to think that her attachment to him was enough to where she said yes. I guess probably just leaning on like it's too much work to start over, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't disagree with that, but like again, I think that's a commentary on on people who find themselves in that place in their lives.
I do have a, not personally, but friends and relatives where it's like, well, do you know how much it costs to like get divorced? And they're just completely tied into one another, so they would rather the devil that they know. Not that I meant the relationship, not the person.
Right. No, totally. Totally.
Yeah, exactly. But for some strange reason, I interpreted it as when she went and Brian was about to confess to her, and she said, "No, it's a strange parallel to Grant." Is Grant the husband? When he said
Aaron, yeah.
Aaron, yes, that's
when
right.
He's like, we'll never talk about it again. This never happened.
Right. It's for some reason, for the power couple, it goes. It goes forward.
Well, it's interesting because the fact that he was going to confess to her, I think, is what redeems him at all. I mean, he's going to be the character he's going to be.
Yes.
But it's clear that like he was going to come clean, and the fact that she knows that, like she clearly immediately understands that that's what's about to happen. Mm-hmm. That is, you're right. That's an agreement. Like that is, definitely agreement by both people. And he makes all of the choices on his own. Mm-hmm. So it's exactly what Matthew Broderick said. Like, let him feel like he's making these moralistic choices, and let him feel like he himself made the decision to be the grown-up, because it's going to be a lot. And by the way, he did. I mean, he made all those decisions on his own. Like, it actually worked not because she manipulated him into doing it. Mm-hmm. It actually worked because that's what he was going to do anyway. Uh-huh. Like, he was going to confess to her. They were going to, and she would, because she was like, yeah, you know what? Let's move on. We both want to move on from this. Yeah. He was like, you know what? I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, I'm done. I am going to be, I mean, obviously he still kisses in. Again, he's the total tool and is going to be that bro. Mm-hmm. But, he shows up for it enough that I think we have the moment of like, oh, okay, well, actually, like, she wants to be with this putt. Great. Like, he's absolutely ridiculous. But, like, he actually did because she didn't, hammer him with something, and then she would end up feeling like he only made that choice because she made him make that choice.
Yeah.
In this weird fucked up way, mm-hmm. she ends up understanding that his commitment to her is genuine because she didn't orchestrate his choices.
Right. Which is a little bit closer to a healthier marriage, which I think I should give people credit where credit is due.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm all about small progresses, so
That's right.
Yeah. So, for the purposes of when did they fall in love, do you think that we saw enough to say if Sam and Ellen fell in love?
No.
Okay.
I don't think they did fall in love. I don't think they fell in love. I think the end of the movie is the beginning of the possibility that they could fall in love, and not even that they will.
Right.
I think that they were given a fighting chance because they got to know each other mm-hmm. through this unconventional way that wasn't physical and wasn't, and of course we have like the crossed wires, missed signals, like we have all of that where she buys caviar to try to seduce the person she thinks she's seducing, which would be, if she were seducing the right person, Matthew Broderick, like she buys it from him. Yeah. They've seen each other, they give it's a cute little nod where the very first time, he's going up into the flat to look at it, she's coming out, and they both do a double take. They both, independent of one another, have a moment of like, hello, who's that? Uh-huh. And so, we have those hints. We have hints of that, but not in this. It's not leaning on. Whereas something like Till There Was You or Serendipity, I mm-hmm. think the whole conceit is like this was bound to happen, and it could have and maybe should have happened all of these places, but mm-hmm. finally, like, oh, the universe kept drawing them together. I don't feel like that's I don't think the magical realism goes that far here. I feel like it's like The only reason that they ever saw each other in the first place was because they both looked at the same flat. The only reason that she went into Dean and DeLuca is because it was near the neighborhood and she wanted to get a thing that she knew that the guy who was into caviar would like. So she went to the best place to get caviar, which is where he works, because that's why he knows so much about food.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So it was like, nothing about it is like, oh my God. And then we bumped into each other in the rain, 70 blocks away, but we just didn't know it was us. It's like, no, there's actually a practical reason why all of those near misses happen, and it's all focused around the apartment, which is, the sort of like extra character in this show or whatever.
And exactly what I was just thinking, so I agree with you, but I'm thinking about when I was younger and how it used to just be like, what? You like the X-Files too? Oh, and me in middle school or anything to that effect of exactly what you were just saying. It's like, it's proximity. You have relationships because this is what you are allowed to work with. This is the pool that you have. So it totally makes sense where it's just like, that would be the case. And a younger me would be like, but of course they fell in love with each other, but they're older and I'm older. I'm just like, no, you're right. This is just setting up some nice little, breadcrumbs for something that could be more.
Yeah. And it's funny, the writer-director has had an extremely successful career, but not doing anything like this. Like he Warren Leight, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, has worked for like Law and Order, like one of the more than one of the Law and Order franchises, and I think is like showrunner of Criminal Intent or something. So he's like never stopped working, but he did not. There are not more rom-coms that you can find that he did. He went straight into like super serious, like humorless procedurals, which I think is so interesting. And I'm kind of bummed because I would have liked to have. And he had a play he wrote in '99 was up for a Pulitzer, but it didn't win. But so he has a very interesting writing background and future from this movie forward. But I'm sort of like, oh no, I would love to see like. I mean, I'd love to see what happens. All that being said, like, I don't know that, and I say this as someone who idolizes him, but like, I don't know that Jim Brooks's romantic comedies from the later side of his career, these more recent things that he's done, like, I'm not sure they're great. So maybe if Warren Leight had kept doing rom-coms, maybe they would have, not been great anyway. I don't know.
This is purely speculative, but if you look at, say, the Steven Spielbergs of the world, where you start with Jaws and you end up with like, what is it, the BFG or like the Big Friendly Giant. So there's always the potential of just like, this is the way they evolve. But there are longer analyses on, YouTube that says like, when this story being made and, this is the person as they were young and single, and this is the person they were when they were married and they had little children. And so it's always possible these little things that are, part of this, it could be a disappointment, like you were saying, or it could just be like, how their life changes. For all we know, he could make a rom-com and it would just be like, actually, I don't even know. I can't even speculate anymore, but that's an interesting point of like what would have happened if he kept going in that direction.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm just curious.
Or if you just did a binge of like Law and Order, Criminal Intent, and see these tiny
What
hints.
if I fall in love with it? I know. What if I'm like, wait, hold on. He's peppered it all the way through these shows that I have never watched.
Yeah, but who has the time for that?
I mean, I guess we make time. I don't know. I feel like I watch a lot of television, so if I really wanted to make the commitment, I could probably find a way to watch all of the Law and Orders. That's not at the top of my list.
No, that's fair enough. And also like watching the Law and Order, but watching it and trying to find something that may not be there.
Yeah, mining for something that may or may not show up and probably wouldn't show up. It does seem a little bit of a lost cause.
So the recommendation is watch it if you want to, and if it's there, that's a pleasant surprise.
There you go. And probably I won't do it.
Right.
And then also like looking at the Rotten Tomatoes score, and it got like a 56%. So like most critics at the time or since, I don't really know how Rotten Tomatoes. Sometimes it seems like something comes to a streaming service, and then all of a sudden like new people review it because I don't know. So I'm not really sure how that works. But yeah, it has a resounding green splat. And I don't get it. Like, I truly don't get it. Like, I actually don't understand it. I mean, there's just so much that gets made now that I'm like, 89%? Did we watch the same movie? Like, that, like, it was so trite and, like, pedantic and, like, predictable, and, you know, what am I missing? And so I you know, I don't know. I don't know what, I didn't, like, do a deep dive to figure out what people complained about, but, but, you know, I guess if you went to the movie expecting something adorable, you would be disappointed because it's not adorable. It's messy.
Yes.
And if you went to see a Woody Allen movie, you would think it was too fluffy. You know what I mean? So it lives in its own space, and maybe that was frustrating to people, but I think that's what makes it a little gem.
Yeah, it has a wonderful distinction of, you may not be prepared for this, but if it's right in your wheelhouse, you will really enjoy this movie. So
I mean, I just think it's so funny. I mean, really great lines. Like you know, I know he's persona non grata, and I'm not saying that I have, you know, I'm like horrified by the developments of the utterly not surprising when you actually hear about it thing. And I have felt that way for a long time because I believed Ellen the first time around. But in terms of, like, you know, what he was known for as far as, like, a sharp turn of phrase and, like, kind of neurotic characters and just tight little, like I said, like, sketches, like and that's why I think when I said confident, I think that's, for me, like, comedy. When comedy is very confident, that makes the whole thing feel very confident. But, like, the woman, you know, just the amount of time that he goes back and forth with a woman who he's holding up the knife to the cheese, and she's like, more, less, more,
yes,
less, less, more, less. I'll take it. And then he's, like, wrapping it up. She goes, I want the other piece.
Yes. That, like, is amazing.
There's so much like that. And Matthew Broderick is so good at his, you know, just little reactions and moments, and, you know, it just reminds you why he's such a good choice for this character. And again, because he's so damn likable, his bad choices, you do sort of, you're like, I'm willing to go along with it because he is very adorable.
Right.
But, you know, and again, Jeanne Tripplehorn, just, like, there are so many bad French accents that get done. And I think maybe I think I saw maybe that she's from Montreal, or maybe somewhere down the line I looked her up, and I think I saw that she was maybe Canadian, which I was like, oh, so she may have actually been raised learning French. That being said, the, you know, French Canadian sounds very, very different from France. But like, she doesn't, again, totally over the top cartoonish character, like, intentionally poorly written, you know. I don't, you know, what she says, something like, I does not need a lecture right now, or whatever, you know. So she's poor, you know, bad grammar and stuff, but, like, she actually sounds French to me, and I'm a real snob about people sounding French. And so again, that's like these little small victories where you're like, wow, you are so over the top in this. But I gotta say, the thing you would expect to be the most over the top would be your French accent, and it actually is not. It's like, it's pretty right on. It's pretty right on. It's great. Pastel. What a great name. Like, Pastel. Right. Of course her name is It's great. It's great.
I had to look it up, and I'm like, is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then also I love, like, at that period of time, I mean, one of my best friends in high school was Swedish, and granted his mom was American, but he spoke perfect English, and also, like, all of his friends who never lived in the States spoke perfect English, and so many, like, I went to Oslo, and every Norwegian I've ever met, they speak extremely good English. Like, they are taught English. So it's actually very funny that they bring in, you know, Dana Wheeler-Nicholson's character Inga, who, you know, doesn't speak any English, because it's like, I just don't think those people exist in Norway. I'm not sure. So that is sort of, that's like aside funny to me. It's
right.
Like, yeah, I'm not sure. That I think he conjured her, because I'm not sure she's real.
Right. And again, I think again because I'm seeing all of these people who have like these longer careers later on, it's just like, oh, we got them in the beginning, but they obviously they weren't as, strong as they were in their later years, but at the same time enough to have a talent to continue working. So
I mean, Michael Imperioli is in that for one line.
yes.
He's like he has a walk-on part. This is way pre-Sopranos. It's like, no, he was excited. I always love that. I love the got him when they were just getting started because I know what that feels like, and that the like I love imagining how excited I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was like, I got a part in a movie,
and
it's one line,
and
but I can't wait.
And strangely, looking back on it, he kind of lends more authenticity to the New York setting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is even funnier.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are some good old-fashioned New York actors in that. It's great.
Exactly. You alluded to it earlier, but do you think, what do you think is the future of the relationship for Ellen and Sam?
I mean, I don't know. I just don't think. I think it's going to be a real warts and all situation. I mean, I think again, like she just left her marriage.
Yes. Hard, difficult.
She's gonna have a lot of guilt about that. He might be jealous. Like it may come back. I think it probably will come back at some point when they're having an argument. He's gonna be like, "And you slept with Brian."
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what it feels like for me to know that, he was intimate with you before I even was? Like, I feel like you can see all of their arguments pretty well mapped out. Oh, yeah. So, whether or not they survive that, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I think maybe yes, because they've also both had the experience of being in relationships that didn't work. And I think, again, applying my own adult logic to that, like when I began my relationship with Brandon, like I knew I had plenty of experience with relationships that were just fine or that were not good. But there was never any question that any of them should have remained. Like I've never had a relationship where I really wish we would have stayed together. We totally would have made it, Oh, okay. And finding that person that you want to make it work with, that you really are like, no, it's not going to get any better than this. This is my guy. This is my person. That coming from that place, puts you in a totally different headspace when you are going to be dealing with conflict than when some part of you knows this isn't right. Right. When you have conflict, when she has conflict with her husband because he buys a house without telling her, and he's mad at her because she slept with somebody and he calls her stupid, and you're like, well, I know where this is coming from. Like, you should never do that. But also, he said, I'm going to bury this. Yeah. I'm going to bury the fact that you slept with someone, and we're just going to pretend like it never happened. It's like, well, good luck with that, because that is going to bubble out in the worst possible ways. And you're going to keep trying to punish her, and he did. Yep. But obviously, she's going to have to get divorced. Like, that's not going to be fun. No. He's probably going to be really resentful. And, so there's a mess. There's a mess at the end of the movie. And you're right. As a younger person seeing this, I was not thinking about that at all. I was just like, they found each other. Yay. But now I'm like, no, it's messy. Yes. But they also both are, for what seems like the first time, certainly for her, she's, only been with Aaron before now. And he's had this relationship with someone who totally didn't respect him, who also was not someone he really respected when it all came down to it. Right. So, when you come into something where you're like, oh, this is what I should have been doing the whole time, I think you find and make the tools to get through those conflicts or get through those personal crises, and let the relationship have its shot. Right. And having the desire to keep together, not out of desperation or fear, but out of just I want this relationship because this is what is good for me, not I can't not have you. Yeah. Which is. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Exactly. And they both are kind of they could both be stubborn and sort of, and that feels very New York to me also. Again, that just feels like the kind of that, again, the sort of love letter to New York. They could both be assholes. Yeah. They could definitely both be oh, shut up. Right. But again, I have friends who are from the East Coast who were born and raised like that and have these deeply loving marriages who also are like, you know, I always love using the crime writers as an example because there was like Kevin and Rebecca, this podcast that I love, really love each other. But like there was one time they were talking about how Kevin was like, I always have to sleep on the right side of the bed. I'm right-handed. And then Rebecca just goes, I'm right-handed too, you stupid piece of shit. And I was like, in a billion years, I would never call Brandon a stupid piece of shit.
Right.
But like it rolls right off of him and they're just laughing their asses off about it. So again, it's like, you know, I feel like knowing that I'm leaning hard into a cliche that may or may not offend people, the idea of like the tough-skulled New Yorker who's like, I'm gonna speak my mind, you know, but also we're gonna get through this and like I respect you. That feels like it's sort of set up for, you know, like they'll like will they be able to get through those characteristics? Well, yeah, because they're kind of both like that, so they will.
Right.
You know?
And you know what that really sounds like is that other cliche of like, oh, in New York when they say F you, they're saying hello, and in California when they say hello, they mean F you.
F you.
So I'm just like, I see that, and I get it. So
that's very true.
Unfortunately, yes.
Very true. Very, very true, my friend. Very true.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Is that I think the mistakes of what happened in the course of this and even before is going to be a little bit stronger for their relationship. But yeah, they got some mess to work out with together. So I guess I am a sucker for that. With them walking down the steps together and Doris Roberts just looking at them and smiling. So yeah, okay, let's have this be happily for now, and let's wish them the best.
Yeah, the movie ends with the couples meet cute and like we don't see the rest, so we can only wonder.
Yeah, exactly. Oh wow, we did it.
We did it.
We did it. It was so great. Janet, thank you so much. And even just bringing all of the details of what you have. Obviously, you have them from, you know, your memories of watching, but even just the pieces about the director and the writer.
Oh, yeah, I had to look them up. I mean, because I was like, I realized I have no idea who wrote and directed this. I have no idea if it was written by one person, directed by another. I have no idea what they went on to do. So it prompted me to actually look that stuff up, which I had not done until we were going to record this. And now I know. Now I know.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I myself am a huge fan of your podcasts. You know, the JV Club. I'm actually wearing my JV Club t-shirt right now.
Nice.
And also there
you've been so great all over the years. It's wonderful and so appreciated.
Yeah, I have dubbed you like my podcast mentor, and I try to lean on the, you know, thoughtfulness and nostalgia of these things. So I greatly appreciate your work. So now that I know about it, where can listeners find that and all your other projects?
Sure. Yeah, well, you mentioned the JV Club, coming up on 500 episodes for that somehow over the last 10 years. I do a podcast about all things Avatar and Legend of Korra with my friend Dante Bosco, who plays Zuko on the original Avatar: The Last Airbender, and we've just been doing it's a rewatch, but I would say like that is such a gross oversimplification and leaves out like a third of the episodes leaves out like 2/3 of the episodes that aren't rewatched, that are real deep dives in with a ton of different people, both behind the show and like people who love the show and come from different kind of diverse backgrounds and want to talk about it. And then I don't know why you would think that all I did is podcasts, but it kind of feels like that right now. And then I've been working this season on Bob Ruff's Truth and Justice, which is a wrongful conviction podcast, and we're trying to tease our way through. This is like season 12 for him, and we're trying to get try to help out and figure out what really happened in a this is a weird side turn, but a triple homicide that occurred back in 2007. So if you're into true crime, I highly recommend checking out this season. It's a very really complex case, and has been really fascinating to learn kind of how these guys ended up in prison and probably shouldn't be.
Incredible. That's amazing that you're working on that kind of podcast.
That's the kind of thing that really gobbles up your attention. Like suddenly you're like, oh, I haven't worked on anything else I'm supposed to be working on, because it's literally a life and death story. So you sort of, you sort of get, you get into it in a different way, but it's very satisfying.
Yeah, of course. And then you just can't help to realize, oh, I've been focusing on this for so long. Where did the time go?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, a couple things to check out.
Yeah, please do. And as for this podcast, you can reach me on Twitter and Instagram at HEAMCast, HEAMCAST, Facebook at Happily Ever Aftermath, and you can always email us at contact@heamcast.com. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, may your aftermath be happy.